The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Lieutenant Commander Vera, Nightshade, Kozlova pushed the industrial mop across the gleaming tiles of the Naval Special Warfare Command headquarters. Her calloused hands, once steady on fighter jet controls at 30,000 feet, now gripped the wooden handle with the same precision she'd once reserved for targeting systems. The other personnel walked past without acknowledgement, just another janitor in Navy utilities, invisible among the polished corridors where America's elite warriors planned their next operations. But something was wrong with this picture, dead wrong. The security cameras had been malfunctioning for 3 days straight, cycling through static bursts every 47 minutes. The maintenance logs showed routine cleaning schedules, but Vera's trained eye caught details others missed. Scuff marks on the floor tiles spelled out coordinates when viewed from above. Someone was using the building's cleaning rotations to pass intelligence, and she was the only one who could see the pattern. 22 years ago, Vera had been the youngest pilot to earn her wings in naval aviation. She'd flown combat missions over hostile territory, her FA-18 Super Hornet cutting through enemy airspace like a steel blade through silk. Her call sign, Nightshade, came from her ability to strike targets in complete darkness, using nothing but instruments and intuition. But that was before the accident, before the bird strike at 200 feet that sent her spiraling into a field outside Pensacola, before the months of reconstructive surgery, before the medical board declared her unfit for flight status. Now she mopped floors and emptied trash bins, her security clearance reduced to janitorial access. The Navy had found her a position, they said, something to keep her busy until retirement. What they didn't know was that Vera had been watching, learning, documenting. Her cleaning routes took her through every classified briefing room, past every strategic planning session, around every corner where secrets were whispered. The mop bucket wheels squeaked rhythmically as she navigated toward the SCIF, the sensitive compartmented information facility where the most classified operations were planned. Tonight's cleaning schedule had her inside during the late shift, when only the duty officers remained. She'd noticed the pattern weeks ago. Every time she cleaned that room, new operational orders appeared on the secure terminals the next morning. Someone was using her presence as cover. As she approached the reinforced door, her reflection caught in the polished surface. The face staring back still carried the sharp intelligence that had once guided million-dollar aircraft through enemy fire, but now it wore the invisible uniform of the overlooked, the dismissed, the underestimated. They saw a broken pilot pushing a mop. They had no idea they were looking at a weapon that had simply changed its targeting system. Tonight, that mistake would cost them everything. The mission parameters were about to shift dramatically, and Lieutenant Commander Vera Kozlova was ready to remind everyone why she'd earned her call sign in the first place. The sky might have taken her wings, but it had given her something far more dangerous, the perfect cover for a hunter who knew how to remain unseen until the moment she chose to strike. 3 hours later, Master Chief Petty Officer Ramon Delgado found himself staring at security footage that made no sense. The timestamp showed 3:47 hours, Building 7, Section C, the SCIF where operational plans for 3 active SEAL missions were stored. On the screen, the night janitor moved with impossible precision, her cleaning pattern forming geometric shapes that spelled out tactical formations. But that wasn't what made his blood run cold. It was the way she moved. Delgado had spent 18 years watching operators navigate hostile territory. He knew the difference between civilian movement and military bearing, even when someone was trying to hide it. This woman, according to her badge, Maria Santos, civilian contractor, moved like someone who'd spent years calculating angles of approach and exit strategies. Her mop strokes weren't random. They were methodical, deliberate, covering sight lines with the efficiency of someone trained in close-quarters reconnaissance. The Master Chief rewound the footage, watching again as the janitor paused at precisely the right intervals to avoid the roving security patrols. She knew their timing down to the second. More disturbing still, her route took her past every biometric scanner, every classified document shredder, every secure terminal in the building. If she wanted to access classified material, she'd mapped the perfect approach. "Son of a bitch," Delgado muttered, reaching for his secure phone. But before he could dial, his computer chimed with an incoming priority message. The sender field showed his own classification level, top secret sensitive compartmented information. Impossible. Only 12 people in the building had that access level, and he knew where all of them were tonight. The message was brief. "Building 7 has been compromised for 3 weeks. I have the proof. Trust no one in your chain of command until you verify my credentials. Meet me at coordinates 32, 7,157 degrees N, 117, 1,611 degrees W. Come alone." Nightshade. Nightshade. Delgado's fingers froze over the keyboard. That call sign belonged to a ghost, a pilot who'd vanished from active duty after a training accident years ago. The official reports listed her as medically retired, but the classified addendum told a different story. Vera Kozlova had been recruited for a deep-cover operation, so sensitive that even her commanding officers believed she'd been discharged. The coordinates led to Coronado Beach, a stretch of sand where SEAL candidates had endured Hell Week for generations. If this was really Nightshade, she was choosing her ground carefully, neutral territory where they could talk without electronic surveillance, where the sound of waves would mask their conversation from directional microphones. Delgado studied the janitor's face on the frozen security feed. 20 years of combat experience had taught him to trust his instincts, and every instinct screamed that this woman was more than she appeared. The way she held her shoulders, the calculated efficiency of her movements, the fact that she'd somehow gained access to his classified communication systems. This wasn't a custodial worker. This was an operator. He grabbed his sidearm and headed for the door, but stopped when he noticed something else in the footage. In the corner of the frame, barely visible, stood a figure in Admiral's insignia watching the janitor work. The timestamp showed he'd been there for 17 minutes, observing in complete silence. When the janitor finally left the frame, the Admiral had smiled and nodded once, a gesture of professional respect that sent ice through Delgado's veins. Someone very high up the chain of command knew exactly who Maria Santos really was. The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly before them as Master Chief Delgado's boots hit the sand at Coronado Beach. The coordinates had led him to a section of shoreline where massive rocks provided natural concealment from both the naval base and civilian areas. Waves crashed rhythmically against the barriers, creating white noise that would defeat most listening devices. Whoever had chosen this location understood operational security at the highest level. She emerged from the shadows like smoke given form. Gone were the janitor's coveralls and the submissive posture he'd observed on the security footage. The woman who stepped into the moonlight moved with the controlled grace of a predator, her bearing unmistakably military despite the civilian clothes. Her eyes held the sharp focus he'd seen in the faces of operators returning from deep cover missions, alert, calculating, and carrying secrets that could reshape entire theaters of operation. "Master Chief Delgado," she said, her voice cutting through the ocean's roar with practiced authority. "Thank you for coming alone." Nightshade. The call sign felt strange on his lips, like speaking the name of someone presumed dead. Lieutenant Commander Vera Kozlova, officially retired from active duty 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days ago. Her smile held no warmth. "Unofficially, I've been conducting the longest deep-cover surveillance operation in naval special warfare history." Delgado's hand instinctively moved toward his sidearm. "Surveillance of what?" "Of whom, Master Chief? And the answer is going to test everything you believe about the chain of command." She pulled out a waterproof case, extracting documents that bore the highest classification markings he'd ever seen. 3 weeks ago, I identified a security breach that compromises every SEAL operation planned for the next 6 months. The leak isn't coming from enemy infiltration or cyber warfare. Then where? It's coming from inside Naval Special Warfare Command. Someone with admiral-level access has been feeding operational intelligence to foreign assets for at least 8 months. The cleaning schedules, the security camera malfunctions, the maintenance rotations, they've all been orchestrated to provide cover for intelligence transfers. The documents she handed him contained photographs, communication intercepts, and financial records that painted a picture of betrayal at the highest levels. Bank transfers to offshore accounts, encrypted messages sent during classified briefings, and most damning of all, operational plans that had been modified to expose SEAL teams to unnecessary risks. "Why come to me?" Delgado asked, studying the evidence that could destroy careers and end lives. "Why not go through official channels?" Vieira's expression darkened. "Because the person orchestrating this operation has been watching me for 3 years. They know about my cover identity, they know about my surveillance capabilities, and they've been using my presence to identify which operations I'm monitoring. Every time I get close to exposing them, another SEAL team gets compromised in the field." Jesus Christ! The implications hit him like a physical blow. How many teams? 7 operations over 8 months. 14 casualties that should never have happened. Good operators died because someone in our command structure sold them out. Her voice carried the weight of every funeral she'd been forced to watch from the shadows, every flag-draped coffin that represented her failure to expose the truth quickly enough. The Master Chief stared at the classified documents, recognizing operational names he'd helped plan, teams he'd trained, men he'd served with for years. The betrayal cut deeper than any enemy action he'd ever faced. This wasn't death in combat, this was murder disguised as operational hazard. "What do you need from me?" Access to the secured communication logs from Admiral Morrison's terminal, and Master Chief. Her eyes met his with lethal certainty. "When this goes down, everyone in that building becomes a potential hostile. Trust no one until we know how deep this goes." Admiral Patricia Morrison stood in her corner office, 40 floors above San Diego Harbor, studying the city lights that sparkled like scattered diamonds against the Pacific darkness. Her reflection in the bulletproof glass showed a career officer who had climbed through every rank the Navy offered, earning her stars through decades of flawless service and political acumen that had kept her ahead of every career-ending scandal that claimed her contemporaries. But tonight, those same political instincts were screaming warnings. The secure phone on her desk had remained silent for 6 hours, an unprecedented gap in communication from her contact across the Pacific. Colonel Chen Wei of the People's Liberation Army Navy typically sent status updates every 4 hours, a schedule they'd maintained for 8 months of their carefully orchestrated intelligence exchange. His silence either meant the operation was compromised or he was dead. Morrison opened the encrypted laptop that officially didn't exist, typing commands that accessed communication networks buried so deep in classified architecture that their discovery would trigger congressional investigations. The screen displayed financial records showing wire transfers to accounts in Singapore, Switzerland, and the Cayman Islands, enough money to fund a comfortable retirement, assuming she lived long enough to enjoy it. The betrayal had started innocently enough. A Chinese naval attaché at a diplomatic reception, charming conversation about mutual challenges in military leadership, an invitation to discuss areas of common interest, away from official channels. The money had come later, after she'd shared seemingly harmless intelligence about training schedules and personnel rotations. By the time she realized the scope of what she'd become involved in, Chen Wei had recordings of their conversations and evidence of financial transactions that would destroy her career and land her in federal prison for the rest of her life. So she doubled down, feeding him increasingly sensitive information to maintain the illusion that she was a willing participant rather than a trapped asset. SEAL operational plans, submarine patrol routes, carrier group movements, intelligence that had resulted in mysteriously well-informed enemy responses during exercises, and what the Pentagon termed operational complications during actual missions. A soft knock interrupted her brooding. "Come in." Master Chief Delgado entered, his expression unreadable. "Ma'am, we need to discuss the security footage from Building 7. Morrison's blood pressure spiked, but her voice remained steady. "What about it?" "The night janitor, Maria Santos." He placed a tablet on her desk, showing freeze-frame images of the woman she'd been monitoring for 3 years. Her movement patterns suggest military training, extensive training. "Interesting observation, Master Chief. Have you run a background check?" "That's the problem, Admiral. Her background check is too clean. No social media presence before her employment date, no verifiable work history, no family contacts. It's like she materialized out of thin air 3 years ago." Morrison studied the images, recognizing the face that haunted her operational planning. Vera Kozlova, the pilot whose medical discharge had provided perfect cover for the most comprehensive surveillance operation in naval special warfare history. The woman who'd been documenting every security breach, every unauthorized access, every classified conversation that took place within 50 feet of a trash bin or cleaning cart. "What do you recommend, Master Chief?" "Full security investigation, background verification, possible polygraph examination." His eyes never left her face, searching for reactions that might confirm suspicions she couldn't allow him to have. "And ma'am, I think we should consider the possibility that she's not working alone." The statement hung in the air like a challenge. Morrison recognized the tactical positioning. Delgado was testing her responses, watching for tells that would confirm or deny his developing theories. He suspected something, but wasn't sure what. The next few seconds would determine whether this conversation ended with his cooperation or his elimination. "Schedule the investigation, Master Chief. Full spectrum analysis. I want to know everything about Maria Santos by tomorrow morning." "Yes, ma'am." He collected the tablet, pausing at the door. "Admiral, if she is conducting surveillance operations against this command, she's had access to classified material for 3 years. The damage assessment alone could take months." Morrison nodded gravely, already calculating the timeline for her extraction from San Diego. "Then we'd better hope she's just an overly observant janitor." The Coronado Bridge stretched across San Diego Bay like a steel prayer against the pre-dawn darkness, its lights reflecting off the water in broken patterns that reminded Vera of tracer rounds cutting through night skis over Afghanistan. She stood at the center span, 200 feet above the naval base where her career had ended and her real mission had begun, waiting for the phone call that would either vindicate 3 years of deep cover surveillance or confirm that she'd been burned by the very people who'd recruited her for this assignment. The encrypted satellite phone buzzed once, twice, then connected to a voice she'd heard only 3 times in her entire military career. Director Sarah Walsh of the Defense Intelligence Agency spoke with the calm authority of someone who'd spent decades managing operations that officially never happened. "Nightshade report. Operation Lighthouse is compromised. Admiral Morrison has been feeding intelligence to Chinese naval intelligence for at least 8 months. I have documented evidence of 14 casualties resulting from leaked operational plans." "Are you certain about Morrison?" Vera closed her eyes, seeing again the faces of the SEALs who died because someone had sold their positions to the enemy. "I watched her personally modify operational orders 43 minutes before they were transmitted to SEAL Team 6. The modifications exposed their extraction route to hostile observation. 3 men died in that ambush." "Evidence." biometric logs showing her terminal access during off-duty hours, financial records linking her to accounts receiving wire transfers from Chinese sources, and recorded conversations with Colonel Chen Wei of the Plan Intelligence Division. Plus, Master Chief Delgado is now investigating my cover identity, which means Morrison has activated countermeasures. Silence stretched across the encrypted connection while Walsh processed the implications. 3 years of deep cover surveillance operations don't end quietly. Too many careers, too many classified programs, too many lives hung in the balance for simple military justice to suffice. Nightshade, you are hereby activated for Phase 2. Termination with extreme prejudice is authorized for any personnel confirmed as compromised assets. Rules of engagement are weapons-free. Civilian casualties are to be minimized, but not at the expense of operational success. You have 48 hours to complete the mission before we burn the entire operation and extract you. Understood. What about Master Chief Delgado? Evaluate and decide. If he can be trusted, recruit him. If he can't, eliminate him. Walsh's voice carried no emotion, only the cold calculation of someone who'd sent thousands of people to their deaths for the greater good. Vieira, the intelligence Morrison has already transmitted has compromised submarine patrol patterns throughout the Pacific Theater. If she makes contact with her handlers before we can stop her, the strategic implications could trigger a shooting war. Then she won't make contact. How certain are you? Vieira looked down at the naval base where she'd once been honored as one of their finest pilots, where she'd later been discarded as a broken asset, and where she now served as their invisible guardian against threats they couldn't see coming. The irony wasn't lost on her. The same institution that had declared her unfit for active duty was about to discover that she'd become their most effective weapon precisely because they'd learned to ignore her presence. Director, I've spent 3 years watching these people through their garbage cans and cleaning supply closets. I know their schedules, their habits, their weaknesses, and their fears. Morrison thinks she's been hunting me, but she's wrong. The wind off San Diego Bay carried the salt smell of the ocean that had taken her flying career and given her something far more dangerous in return. I've been hunting her. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Webb of the Naval Criminal Investigative Service arrived at Building 7 with the methodical precision of a surgeon preparing for a complex operation. His team of investigators carried equipment designed to uncover secrets buried in digital architecture, financial records, and the kind of evidence that destroyed careers and ended lives. But what they found in Admiral Morrison's office suggested something far more sophisticated than simple espionage. The desk drawers had been emptied with professional efficiency. No random searching, no evidence of panic, just the clean extraction of specific documents that would be necessary for maintaining operational security during an emergency evacuation. The computer terminals showed signs of data wiping that required administrative access and classified software that shouldn't have been available to anyone below the Joint Chiefs level. Sir, Special Agent Kim Nakamura called from behind the desk, her voice tight with concern. The secure communication logs show outgoing transmissions up until 3:47 hours this morning, then complete silence. But the timestamp metadata indicates someone was still using this terminal until 6:23 hours. Webb studied the evidence with growing unease. Morrison had vanished between the night shift change and morning formation, leaving behind an office that had been sanitized with the thoroughness of a professional intelligence officer conducting an emergency extraction. Either she'd been kidnapped by foreign assets, or she was those foreign assets. What about building security? That's where it gets interesting. Nakamura pulled up footage on her tablet showing the corridors outside Morrison's office. No record of her leaving through any monitored exit, but look at this. The screen showed the janitor's cart moving through the executive level at 3:41 hours, 6 minutes before Morrison's last recorded communication. The cleaning woman pushing it wore the same unremarkable uniform she'd worn for 3 years, but something about her posture had changed. She moved with predatory awareness, her eyes constantly scanning for threats, her path chosen to avoid security cameras while maintaining plausible deniability. Run facial recognition on the janitor. Already did, sir. Maria Santos, civilian contractor, employed by NavFac Southwest for 3 years. But, sir, her biometric signature doesn't match any records in the Federal Employment Database. It's like she materialized out of thin air. Webb's phone buzzed with an incoming secure message from DIA headquarters. The content made his blood run cold. Operation Lighthouse active. All personnel are to provide complete cooperation to Lieutenant Commander Vera Kozlova, call sign Nightshade. Classify all evidence as top-secret sensitive compartmented information pending operational completion. Nightshade. He'd heard whispers about deep cover operations that didn't officially exist, assignments so classified that the operator's own service records were falsified to maintain operational security. If Maria Santos was actually Lieutenant Commander Kozlova, then everything they'd assumed about the security breach was wrong. She wasn't the threat, she was the response to the threat. Nakamura, I need you to access personnel records for Admiral Morrison. Full financial analysis, communication logs, travel records, everything. And pull the files on any SEAL operations that have taken casualties in the past 8 months. Sir, what are we looking for? Webb stared at the empty office where one of the Navy's most senior officers had vanished without a trace, leaving behind evidence of betrayal that could reshape American naval strategy in the Pacific. The janitor with no past had been watching, documenting, preparing for this moment when the traitor finally revealed herself completely. We're looking for proof that our cleaning lady has been the only thing standing between our submarine fleet and a shooting war with China. The morning briefing at Naval Special Warfare Command proceeded with the mechanical precision of an institution that had been compromised from within, but didn't yet understand the scope of its vulnerability. Master Chief Delgado sat in the back row, watching faces he'd trusted for years, while wondering which of them might be complicit in the intelligence leak that had cost 14 good operators their lives. Commander Sarah Mitchell led the operational briefing, outlining 3 active SEAL missions scheduled for the next 48 hours. Her presentation included detailed insertion routes, extraction timelines, and tactical objectives that would normally be restricted to need-to-know personnel. But as she spoke, Delgado noticed something that made his tactical instincts scream warnings. Every operation she described would place American forces in positions where they'd be vulnerable to the kind of intelligence that Admiral Morrison had been selling to Chinese assets. The timing wasn't coincidental. It was a trap designed to eliminate the witnesses to 3 years of systematic betrayal. Questions? Mitchell asked, her eyes scanning the room with the confidence of someone who believed her secret was still safe. Delgado raised his hand. Ma'am, given the security concerns raised by NCIS this morning, shouldn't we consider postponing these operations pending a full damage assessment? What security concerns, Master Chief? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Either Mitchell was genuinely unaware of Morrison's disappearance, or she was testing to see how much the investigation had discovered. Delgado studied her expression, looking for tells that would reveal whether she was ally or enemy. Admiral Morrison's office was found empty this morning. NCIS is treating it as a potential security breach. Mitchell's reaction was immediate and telling. Her eyes widened slightly, her breathing pattern shifted, and her hand moved unconsciously toward the classified tablet that contained operational details for all 3 missions. Fear, not surprise. She knew something was wrong, but she'd expected it. I haven't been briefed on any security issues, she said carefully. Then perhaps we should contact NCIS for clarification, before proceeding with operations that could expose our teams to unnecessary risk. "That won't be necessary, Master Chief." The voice came from the back of the briefing room, where Lieutenant Commander Vera Kozlova stood in full dress uniform, her insignia polished to mirror brightness. Gone was any pretense of being a civilian contractor. The woman who entered the room moved with the lethal grace of a combat pilot, her eyes scanning faces with the predatory intensity of someone identifying targets. The transformation was startling. 3 years of careful conditioning had trained everyone in the room to see her as invisible, insignificant, beneath notice. Now she commanded attention like a force of nature, her presence filling the space with barely contained lethality. This was what a real operator looked like when the mission parameters shifted from surveillance to direct action. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd been given extraordinary operational latitude. "This briefing is now classified top secret sensitive compartmented information. All personnel are to remain seated pending individual security interviews." Commander Mitchell stood abruptly. "On whose authority?" "Defense Intelligence Agency, Operational Directive Lighthouse. Admiral Morrison has been identified as a compromised asset who has been selling classified intelligence to Chinese naval intelligence for 8 months. Anyone attempting to leave this room before clearance will be considered potentially hostile." The briefing room erupted in shocked murmurs and angry protests, but Vieira's hand rested casually on the sidearm that marked her return to active duty status. The message was clear. Cooperation was mandatory. Resistance would be met with appropriate force. Delgado watched the faces around him, cataloging reactions that would help identify who was surprised by these revelations and who had been expecting them. In the corner, Commander Mitchell was quietly reaching for her phone, a movement that could be innocent communication or an attempt to warn co-conspirators that their operation had been exposed. The hunt was about to begin, and everyone in the room was either predator or prey. Commander Sarah Mitchell's hand trembled as she reached for her secure phone, knowing that the next 60 seconds would determine whether she lived to see another sunrise. 3 years of careful operational security were unraveling with devastating speed, and the woman she dismissed as an irrelevant janitor now stood between her and the only escape route that didn't end in a federal execution chamber. "Commander Mitchell," Vera's voice cut through the briefing room tension like a blade through silk, "step away from the communication device." Mitchell's training kicked in, 18 years of naval service, including combat tour in 3 theaters of operation. She wasn't going down without a fight. Her hand continued moving toward the phone while her free hand dropped to the service weapon at her hip, calculating angles of engagement and wondering if she could eliminate the primary threat before the Master Chief could react. "I said step away." The room held its breath as 2 experienced combat veterans faced each other across 20 feet of government carpeting, both armed, both committed to missions that could only end with one of them dead. Around them, junior officers pressed themselves against the walls, recognizing the lethal potential of operators pushed beyond their breaking points. Mitchell drew her weapon in one smooth motion, training kicking in as she acquired target lock on Vera's center mass. But she was moving against someone who'd spent 3 years studying every person in this room, memorizing their habits, their reflexes, their tactical tendencies. Vera had been expecting this moment since the day she'd first noticed discrepancies in the operational planning schedules. The lieutenant commander's response was surgical in its precision. Her own sidearm cleared leather and acquired target lock before Mitchell's weapon had fully cleared its holster, muscle memory from years of combat flight training, translating seamlessly to close-quarters engagement. But instead of firing, she held position, offering one final opportunity for surrender. "Commander, you're outgunned and outmaneuvered. Drop the weapon and step away from the communication device. This is your only warning." "You don't understand what you're interfering with," Mitchell said, her weapon steady despite the hopelessness of her tactical position. This operation is bigger than Admiral Morrison, bigger than the intelligence she was selling. You've stumbled into something that involves strategic assets throughout the Pacific Fleet. I understand perfectly. You've been identifying which SEAL operations I was monitoring, then feeding that information to Chinese intelligence so they could eliminate witnesses to your espionage network. 14 good operators died because you sold them out. Those men died for the greater good. The intelligence we provided helped prevent a shooting war between superpowers. Sometimes peace requires sacrifice. Vera's expression didn't change, but something lethal shifted behind her eyes. Those men died because you're a traitor who sold out your oath for Chinese money. There's no noble cause here, just greed and betrayal. The philosophical debate ended when Mitchell made her choice. Instead of surrendering, she pivoted toward the secure terminal that contained communication links to the compromised network, intending to send a warning that would alert every asset in the espionage ring that their operation had been exposed. Vera's response was immediate and final. The single gunshot echoed through the briefing room like thunder, the sound bouncing off government walls that had heard classified secrets but never witnessed execution for treason. Commander Mitchell collapsed behind the lectern, her weapon unfired, her mission incomplete. Blood spread across operational maps that would never be used to endanger American lives again. In the sudden silence that followed, Vera lowered her weapon and looked at the faces staring at her in shock and horror. Some showed the understanding of warriors who recognized necessary action. Others displayed the disgust of people who'd never been forced to make impossible choices in service of the greater good. "Master Chief Delgado," she said, her voice steady despite having just killed a fellow officer, "secure that terminal and extract all communication logs from the past 72 hours. Anyone who attempts to interfere will be considered hostile." The transformation was complete. Lieutenant Commander Vera Kozlova had returned to active duty in the most definitive way possible, and everyone in the room now understood that the invisible janitor had always been the most dangerous person in the building. The sky had taken her wings, but it had given her something far more lethal, the perfect cover for eliminating threats that other operators couldn't even see coming. The Pacific Fleet's most classified operations center hummed with the nervous energy of an institution, discovering that its deepest secrets had been compromised by the very people sworn to protect them. Admiral James Harrison, Morrison's immediate superior, stood before a wall of monitors displaying intelligence that made his 30-year career feel like preparation for this single moment of institutional betrayal. Lieutenant Commander Kozlova had presented evidence that painted a picture of systematic espionage reaching into the highest levels of naval command. Financial records showing wire transfers to offshore accounts, recorded conversations with Chinese intelligence officers, and most damning of all, operational modifications that had directly resulted in American casualties. The scope of the betrayal was staggering. "How long has this been going on?" Harrison asked, studying photographs that showed Admiral Morrison in conversation with Colonel Chen Wei at diplomatic receptions spanning 8 months. "The financial transfers began 11 months ago," Vera replied, her voice carrying the clinical precision of someone who'd spent 3 years documenting every detail. "But the intelligence sharing started earlier. I estimate Morrison has been compromised for at least 18 months, possibly longer. And you've been watching her the entire time." "Not just watching, sir. Documenting. Every classified conversation that took place within 50 feet of a trash bin or cleaning cart was recorded. Every security breach, every unauthorized access, every modification to operational orders." She handed him a tablet containing terabytes of surveillance data, everything needed to prosecute the case and identify co-conspirators. Harrison scrolled through evidence that would reshape American naval strategy in the Pacific. The Chinese hadn't just been buying intelligence. They'd been systematically degrading American operational capabilities, identifying weaknesses in submarine patrol patterns, carrier group movements, and SEAL insertion techniques that took decades to develop. What about the other compromised personnel? Commander Mitchell is dead. She chose to resist rather than surrender. But there are at least 3 other assets in this command structure, possibly more. The investigation is ongoing. Jesus Christ! Harrison set down the tablet, studying the woman who'd spent 3 years living as an invisible guardian against threats the Navy's traditional security apparatus couldn't detect. Why the deep cover? Why not conduct this investigation through official channels? Because the penetration was too deep, sir. We needed someone with unlimited access to classified areas who wouldn't trigger counterintelligence protocols. A decorated combat pilot who'd been medically retired provided perfect cover. And the cost? Vera's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. 3 years of my life, 22 years of aviation service reduced to mopping floors and emptying trash cans, watching good operators die because I couldn't move fast enough to prevent their missions from being compromised. The weight of sacrifice hung in the air between them. Harrison had spent his career asking people to give everything for their country, but he'd never asked someone to give up their identity, their reputation, their very existence as a military officer. Vera had become a ghost in service of her oath, invisible among the people she'd sworn to protect. What do you need to complete this operation? 48 hours, full operational authority, and the understanding that some very senior people are going to discover they've been living lies for years. Harrison nodded, recognizing the kind of moral courage that defined the best officers he'd ever served with. Consider yourself reactivated to full-duty status, Lieutenant Commander, whatever you need. Thank you, sir. She moved toward the door, then paused. Admiral, when this is over, when the trials are finished and the security reviews are complete, I'd like to request transfer back to flight status. Your medical records show. My medical records show what they needed to show for operational security. I've been flying civilian aircraft for 3 years, maintaining my qualifications. The sky never really let me go, sir. It just taught me how to hunt from different angles. As she left, Harrison stared at the evidence of betrayal that would dominate headlines for months and reshape congressional oversight of military intelligence. But what stayed with him was the image of a combat pilot who'd given up everything she loved to become something far more dangerous. A guardian invisible to everyone except the enemies who never saw her coming. The Chinese Naval Intelligence Station in Shanghai operated with the quiet efficiency of an organization that had been infiltrating American military communications for over a decade. Colonel Chen Wei stood before a wall of monitors displaying intercepted communications, satellite imagery, and operational intelligence that represented the crown jewel of foreign espionage operations against the United States Navy. But tonight, the monitors showed nothing but static. For 18 hours, his primary asset within Naval Special Warfare Command had maintained communication silence. Admiral Morrison's last transmission had referenced security complications and potential exposure, but subsequent attempts to reestablish contact had failed completely. Either she was dead, captured, or conducting emergency protocols that required complete communication blackout. Colonel, his aide approached with the nervous energy of someone bearing bad news to a superior known for eliminating messengers who brought unwelcome information. Our monitoring stations report unusual activity throughout the Pacific Fleet. Submarine patrol patterns have been modified, carrier group movements have been altered, and all SEAL operations scheduled for this week have been postponed pending security reviews. Chen Wei studied intelligence reports that painted a picture of systematic damage control throughout American naval forces. The speed and scope of the response suggested that the Americans hadn't just discovered his espionage network. They'd been monitoring it, documenting it, preparing for this moment when the entire operation could be rolled up simultaneously. Have we received any communication from secondary assets? Negative, sir. Commander Mitchell's last message was transmitted 17 hours ago, but it was incomplete. The transmission cut off mid-sentence. The implications were clear. His carefully cultivated network of American naval officers had been compromised, possibly eliminated. Months of operational planning, millions of dollars in bribes and blackmail material, years of strategic intelligence gathering, all of it burning simultaneously in a coordinated American counterintelligence operation. Chen Wei opened the encrypted communication terminal that connected him directly to Beijing, knowing